Kia ora, hi. For those who don't know me, I run the Community Energy Network. It's a federation of nearly 30 community groups, mostly charities. We've got One Lines Network, Orion, as a member. Um, we've been around for about 25 years and have grown up in the energy hardship space, healthy homes. I think collectively now we've done well over 300,000 healthy home assessments through that group and probably retrofitted over 150,000 homes. I used to have a number about what that's worth to the country. It's in the billions in terms of return on investment from doing that work. And just recognizing I've got one member here and one ex-member here in the room. So hi, Meta and Scott. So today, about 7 years ago, we started getting into community energy. We were very naive about what that meant and how hard that would be. And we've kind of built our knowledge and brought in people to help us out. So today is a bit of a run through about what we've learnt over the last 7 years. And I'm going to skip through some of these slides pretty quickly and sort of focus on where we've got to practically in terms of our community energy activator. So just first of all, social license. I spend a lot of time in Wellington and I spend a lot of time with sort of sector leading organisations. And they've got a different definition to me of what social license means and what the investment in that actually looks like. The point I would really like to focus on here is that all of this stuff takes time to build trust. It's hard to win and easy to lose. You only need to stuff up once or twice and you're back to ground zero on your social license. And I chucked this in perhaps a little bit tongue in cheek at the last minute. Weasel words. These are all words that I use quite often. And a lot of people, other people use these words as well. Sustainability is probably the most common. Resilience is also up there. And right now, affordability is getting used a lot. I call them weasel words because we don't have an agreed definition that we all use for those words. So what I think they mean versus what other people think they mean is quite different. Affordability, from my point of view, is not something that can be defined by the sector. It gets defined by the household. So just sort of a note of caution about how we use our words. This is my new favorite term, presumed benevolence. And this is not my term. I found this recently. Sarah Bice, she's an Australian. So that's cool. But basically the definition there, unconscious framing bias. So when we're working on a problem, we come in with our own frames of reference, our own bias. Typically renewable energy, that's a good thing, right? We all think that's a good thing. We've got a solution, let's go. Let's get it into our communities, let's get it into our consumers. Quite often that's done really poorly. And so the social license based on this presumed benevolence is very low. Typically, what I've seen in the sector in the last 7 years, and I think it's probably going further back, it's even worse. This gets represented as top-down, patriarchal, perhaps condescending to the actual needs of that community, of any community. And is typically very poor at understanding what that community needs and or wants, especially on a longer time frame. How that gets represented typically as a tech push. People want to talk about solar panels and batteries, and they want to talk about ROI from an economic point of view, not a social one. And so. And I've got a link in here. If you haven't seen it, I thoroughly recommend it. This is the title here is Energy Transition, a Swap, a Halt, or a Paradigm Shift. Basically, this was Dr. Mike Joy and David Hall from AUT duking it out over a series of newsroom articles a little while ago. I guess newsroom got a little bit sick of that and said take it somewhere else. So it went into LinkedIn, and so this is the link to the LinkedIn debate. And there's I've never met her, Jennifer Wilkins. I think she's an economist. She kind of became the mediator in there and wrote an article in LinkedIn, sort of combining the two arguments. Basically, Dr. Mike Joy was saying degrowth. You know, we've hit our limits. We need to change the way our communities run. David Hall was going, yeah, look, you might be right, but green growth, and we need to keep our options open. And they were butting heads on this, and Jennifer was trying to find the middle ground. And the point I was making here is that that's at a very academic policy level. If you grounded that in the community, they could both be right and both be wrong. And so it's just be careful how we talk about it. Typically, the pushbacks, I'm sure we've all seen versions of it. I know Scott has. In terms of blue skin, the community pushbacks, it's the type of technology you're using, it's the speed you're going, it's the pace, the size that you're trying to get in there. It could be the location, you're on the wrong hill, or it could even be just who you are. You're the wrong person for that community. It's everything else is perfect. You've got it all right, but you're the wrong person. Maybe you got the wrong background. You don't have the trust of that particular community. I mentioned before the resilience gets used a lot in the energy sector. And so just sort of calling out definition of resilience here a little bit. I think for most networks, that's the definition of resilience up there. The tree falling on the line, storms. So from their point of view, it's this sort of stuff: grid performance, security of supply, safety. Typically, that's what happens on days like today, where it's super windy. And that's the sort of thing that they want to talk about. If you there's big overlap here, so I want to sort of celebrate that overlap a little bit. But if you go and ask a community what resilience means, then they're talking about democratization, taking an ownership role. So they've got to understand what's going on first. There might be some cultural stuff in there that needs to be really well considered right at the start about how the design of the project is done. Climate change adaptation. I had a series of conversations with government officials a few years ago where they were writing a climate change emission strategy and wanted to talk about community energy. I said, yeah, that's fine. When you want to do an emission and adaptation strategy, then we'll talk, because as far as I'm concerned, you're only counting half the value if it's, well, not even half, probably 20% of the value of a project if it's an emission strategy. And they said, look, that's all we've got. That's our scope. So if you don't want to talk about it, then go away. So I went away because it was, if you constrain the project in that way, then you're immediately discounting all those other values. So how these discussions are scoped is really important. In terms of responses to that presumed benevolence, so this collective efficacy is another cool term. This is when everybody involved in the project genuinely sees value in it. And I mean genuinely. So they all understand what their value sets are, and they all understand how that's going to be realized through the project. You don't achieve that unless you've got co-design and you've got opportunities for them to engage all the way through it, including for the next 30, 40 years, however long the project lasts. This is an interesting one. I think this is Finland, this research bit here. There is no trickle down for community energy projects. You don't develop a community energy program from the centre out. So from the government point of view, it doesn't work. You've got to develop it in the community. It works the other way around. If the community runs it and develops it, it could be used by the community next door. They've done the work in terms of design, but the central out doesn't work. And so these are the features that you need to have: humility, transparency, and time. And that time is about cups of tea. I'm gonna ignore that one because I've used that quote twice. I'm just pointing this one out really. before I get into the activator. Anna Burker, who hopefully a lot of you have heard of. This is a piece of work that she released, I think, earlier this year, sort of comparing various countries with their community energy policy settings. And if I got it in there, I haven't. Oh, there we go. Relatively hostile. That's how our country's policy settings were determined by Anna and her friends in terms of, and I don't think it's actively hostile. I think it's passively hostile. We don't understand the value of it, so we're not going to include any opportunities to realize that value in the way that our market has set up, which makes it very hostile when you're asking for big decisions to be made. So I just wanted to, I've kind of been a little bit negative Nelly in this talk. I just wanted to finish with a bit of a positive vibe. So this is this community energy activator. This photo here is the cohort of Canterbury members that were involved in our pilot in September through to November last year. And I'm just going to recognise this woman here, Sam Elder and Hirarangi Piri, who both, or were at the time, both Orion employees. Sam was a GM. And Hirarangi, I think, is still the only community energy manager in the network in New Zealand. All 29 of them should have one. But anyway, we put together a program. It was based on Ara Ake's how-to guide for community energy projects. So 10 of those 12 weeks were a chapter each week. I think that the key outcomes that we got out of this, first of all, it really did build a connection between the community and the network, the EDB. It genuinely did. And it tested what now I've got a new term for, presumed benevolence. It tested a lot of those. We had engineers coming in saying only 5 kilowatts per home, all that sort of stuff. And the community said, why? And the engineers didn't have a good response. So, okay, maybe we'll fudge that one when we're talking with you guys. And so it started to test some of those assumptions that have been made. The other really important piece was the navigators. So every community group had an expert that was their sponsor, if you like, their coach, their mentor. And it took them through, that person took each group through the 12 weeks, made sure they kept coming back, and also made sure that any questions they had got answered. Sometimes by other navigators, if it wasn't their skill set. It enabled us to get a little bit more robust about some of the enablers that we are missing in this country for community energy projects. Big one is finance, access to the right sort of finance. Community energy projects are not market-driven projects. They are social impact-driven projects. So you have an interesting set of people out there who should be interested in financing these sorts of projects. Philanthropy are slow to the game. They're getting there, but we're not, the types of return we'll be after is like 4 or 5%. The market's at 15. So there's a big gap between where a typical investor wants to be versus where we need it to be to get to the community outcomes. We're just finishing the second activator in Taranaki. You all heard Daniel Knoth talking earlier. He's been heavily involved in that second one. So if someone's talking to me or I'm not around, go annoy him to find out how that second one's going. I was in Gisborne yesterday. We're going to have another activator over there next year, and just talking to Auckland Council and Vector at lunchtime today, we're going to have one in Auckland too next year. So I think there's a far north one not far behind, and probably another one in the Waikato. So these things are starting to fire up. The discussions in Gisborne, I'll just point out that navigator piece, critically important from their point of view, and critically important that those are locals. And so we do absolutely have a skill gap in this country for those navigators. So we're going to have to think pretty hard about how we upskill a cohort of people who can provide that navigator service to our communities. Lots of parallels to the healthy housing space here in terms of eco-design advisor service that's on its knees a little bit right now, but the skill sets that we need are very similar to what we've been talking about for the last 20 years for the healthy housing piece. I think that's all I've got. I probably rattled through that way too fast, but we needed to make up some time anyway. Thank you.
Great. So we've got time for 1 or 2 questions. Are there any in the room? Yeah. Nice to see you, Dougal.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gareth. I'm from Hamden in North Otago, and well, I think we've tried to contact you guys and see if we could get you interested. I'm just wondering whether you're looking for more communities to work with, or you're full up, or what the situation is.
I'm always looking for more communities to work with. We definitely have a capacity constraint right now. How do I get this to not be political, this answer? We don't have much support to provide what, I've mentioned that we're going to do 3 or 4 more of these activators next year. I don't know how we're going to deliver those 3 or 4 activators yet. We're still looking at the funding model for that. I think typically in this country, we're very good at funding projects, very bad at funding the infrastructure required to do those projects properly. And you'd look at the research sector right now and you'd say the same thing. We're defunded. This government's defunded the research sector considerably, and that's a big issue in terms of us proving the worth of these types of projects. The social return on investment is quite a hard thing to measure right now. But yes, to your answer, I want to keep the pipeline going. So yeah, come and grab me afterwards. Yeah.
Great. One more question. Yes, at the back.
So with the completed activator and the one you've just done, and the ideas and actions that the different groups going through them have put together, what would you observe about the interface between these community groups, their ideas, and the power sector that we've got? So
I would say generally they're bemused by this. They're like, how does this fit into the sector we've got, into the design we've got? And my answer would be it doesn't. So we need to redesign the system so it does. The work that we're, I don't want to underestimate the leadership of Sam Elder in that first pilot. She ran that through, I think, to get it done in Orion. So I want to celebrate Orion's curiosity. I think PowerCo's curiosity. There's a few out there that are curious about this. And so these projects are sitting on the margin of the sector rather than in the middle. The other bit that came up, I think it was in an EA workshop I was involved in a couple of weeks ago, we still don't have an energy strategy for this country. And that is a big gap because it's very hard to get this to fit inside a system where it's not part of the core business of this particular system unless we've got a strategy that says we need to move. I mean, you look overseas and the community energy sectors are absolutely smashing it for a whole range of reasons. And that's after the governments have pulled back their funding, their subsidies and what have you. But they've had 10, 15 years of strong support, and that's all that it needed to get going.